Good afternoon, Wednesday, 3rd of March, episode 27 of So What's Been Happening. Bring up a good mate of ours, Lovey. How are you, Alan?
Good, mate. How are you?
Good, mate. I don't think I've ever called you Alan, so that was one out of the box.
I feel like I'm in trouble, mate.
No, never.
Aaron.
Never, mate. Good to see you on a Wednesday afternoon, 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
We all should be working, but largely we kind of are anyway. So great to get an opportunity to chat to our next guest.
Yeah, the old hump day done and dusted, isn't it? Almost. It's good.
Yeah, I don't know about you, mate, but the
Start of blended a bit.
Start of the week tends to go a little bit slower, and then it ramps up quickly after hump day with a good couple of things to look forward to on the weekend. So can't wait to get out to a couple of gigs again.
Yeah. Looking forward to it, mate. Friday night should be a ripper.
So, yeah, just this Friday night at Swamplands in Thornbury, we've got Dave Cosmer and Charles Jenkins. So that'll be a great show. And this Friday night, the Corner Hotel, album launch for the Casanovas. So great to see the Casanovas still pumping away, mate, after 20 years, with Wolfie now joining the band not long ago for a new recording. It'll be great to get those boys back on the stage again. They did a show just before COVID, and then everything got shut down, and now I think everyone is in album release mode, mate, which was great to see, and great to see so many people out and about over the last weekend or so. Hopefully in Melbourne we can keep that for a little while.
Yeah, I read a statistic today. I think it was food and beverages up by 70%, pubs are up by 65% since that 5-day lockdown, and excuse me, and can't remember, something else was up by about 70%. So hopefully that continues and then starts to thrive a bit more. That'd be good.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely a good sign of things to come, hopefully. 50%, I believe, is the target for AFL kicking off, and NRL. That'll be great news to get a crowd out there again.
Yeah, well, 3 weeks out from round 1 or 2 weeks, is it? I'd like to think it could almost get to 75 by round 1, 75%, but there's no reason it can't be 75% before round 4, and then 100% not long after that. We should be back to normal almost. Well, hopefully we will be. That'd be great.
I think there's going to be a bit of pressure from the AFL to try and jam as many numbers in there as quick as they can. So,
and Joe Public.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, I'd hate to be a Collingwood or a Richmond member knowing you got 50% capacity and trying to go into a ballot these days. Not so much a problem at the Demons, mate. We pack them out regardless, mate. So we get our standard 10,000 in there, and as long as we keep winning, we might get to 15 or 20,000.
I don't know why you wouldn't give up your own home game for Essendon to come and play at the MCG, mate. Come on, mate. You should be giving us the opportunity to make more money. It's good for Melbourne in the long run. Come on.
Yeah, look, it is. Look, as you know, mate, our home games are traditionally in Darwin these days, mate. So we don't worry, we travel.
I was going to say, isn't it out at Shepley Oval in Dandenong or something now?
Yeah, not far.
You can play the Dockers out there.
Yeah, wasn't that long ago we played a couple of games. We played in London for one, and then I'm pretty sure we played a game in LA or somewhere similar to that back years ago. So be interesting to see if AFL ever gets to travel again. I don't think China's going to be on the agenda in a hurry.
Oh, no. Not unless you call the Batmans or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. You never know. We could get a team up out of Tassie, based in China, called the Tassie Bats, man. Who knows?
That could be a 1-hour conversation in its own right, why that hasn't happened. It should have happened by now, but, anyway.
As you know,
love the Tassies.
They've got an opportunity. It's just they are overseas, don't forget, so no international travel, mate, so we won't be going to Tassie.
Yeah, strange mob.
Yes. So show 27, mate. This is an exciting one. Fair to say I've known about as we all have known about the famous Roos family for a long time, and to see this young man doing some great things, not only through his own career, but now what he's doing post football and in his life now, mentoring not only young men, but in specific instance, young men 16 to 22. So what a critical age, and really look forward to talking to Dylan Roos, the son of the great Paul Roos.
Yeah, he's already quite an impressive young man. He's I don't want to speak about his father too much because he's got his own name and his own rights in life. But yeah, I think whatever Paul crammed in by the same age, I reckon Dylan's done a bit more from a global perspective, and I reckon it's fantastic. I think the way that we haven't got enough people that help our young guys out. So the more of the Dylan and Roos out there, the better off that certainly our society will be. I see you and we see it every day with young fellas. We know that we'd love to be able to help them and guide them somewhere. But Dylan's just, he's walking the walk to sea.
Yeah, we'll talk to Dylan in a second. But I know myself, having a boy that's 24 now, if I could have had someone in that mentoring role, because let's face it, no one wants to listen to your dad, right? No. You're at that age where dad's not the one you listen to. It's possibly dad's mate if you're lucky. But after that, I think over time, to have someone mentor kids, especially boys, going through what we've all been through in life, it'll be great to have someone steering the ship a little bit, or know you're in good hands.
I reckon I was about 30 and I realised, Dad was right on so many things, and penny dropped on a few things there. It's a learning curve, but if someone else, it's always good that it's someone that third party voice, and normally they're the ones that get listened to a fair bit. So, be interested to see what Dylan's got to say. I'm looking forward to it actually.
Righto. So without that sounds like a good segue as any, mate, into bring up our guest. Here we are. The young up and coming, and if he's not already, he's well and truly on his way. The youngster, Dylan Roos. How are you, Dylan?
G'day, boys. What an introduction. I tell you what, I could just sit backstage listening to you two talk about me all night. So thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words.
No stuff up now, mate.
Exactly right. A lot of pressure you boys have put me under.
Nah, not at all.
Firstly, mate, thanks for joining us on So What's Been Happening, episode 27. Just a little bit of background, mate, because I don't know if I filled you in on kind of how this has come about. It was obviously during COVID lockdown. During that time, we were allowed out in Melbourne for an hour's walk. And during that phase, we'd catch up with a couple of mates here and there if we were lucky. And the classic conversation of, asking the question, I wonder how Macca's going, or Jono, the classic Aussie icon names. Some people hadn't heard from guys, or we thought, well, why don't we jump on the Zoom call, which everyone did at that early stage. And kind of, to be honest, that got pretty boring pretty quickly and that dropped off. So I was fine for the first couple. And then we sat down on one Sunday afternoon, and given we had a lot of musician mates as well, we kind of just went live with a Facebook Live and caught up with mates around the world, which was great to hear. And it was never kind of supposed to go past episode 1, to be perfectly honest, mate. And it's turned into obviously up to 27 now. And during that time, we've had a lot of music guests on. We've also had, personal coaches similar to yourself on before, having a chat about life. And I think if nothing else, mate, that the plan for it really was to just talk about life and what's going on in your life and where we've been. And you never know who's dialing in and who's watching later. We do it as an audio podcast as well. And you just never know who's listening. And there's always someone that can pick up on something. So thanks again for joining us, Dylan, and really look forward to having a chat to you.
Yeah, mate, excited to be on here. Thank you.
So, mate, we just touched on quickly of who you are and your family background. And we don't want to go too deep into that. But obviously, growing up as a Roos has its pros and cons, no doubt, for you as a young man. And just tell us a little bit about family life growing up in those early days and sport for you.
Yeah. I mean, obviously for my younger brother Tyler and I, we didn't know any different. So it as you said, it was not I guess a normal upbringing. I grew up around the footy club at the City Swans. Dad was really good with allowing everyone to kind of have a good work-life balance and have family members around the footy club and stuff. So there was always kids running around, or family allowed to come visit. So no more so than Tyler and I, which we took full advantage of going to see Dad as much as we could at the club. And after games, we would be down in the locker rooms, surrounded by all these awesome footy, icons at the time. But to us, they were just these guys that we'd have a chat to after the game, and if they'd won, it was a good chat. And if it was a loss, then we'd stay in the background and leave them be. So yeah, from that point of view, it was amazing. I had so many incredible mentors growing up, just basically through osmosis, just through being around them and being around the footy club. And Dad really instilled in Tyler and us some really great values from a young age that you don't pick up on until you are older, and you look back and you go, oh, that's why I act the way that I do, or that's why I'm such a strong believer in X, Y, and Z, is because they were instilled at such a young age. So, yeah, the Roos name, as you said, or the Roos legacy, I think you said before I jumped on, has had some great pros growing up, and then obviously the cons that came along with that was, every game of football, Tyler and I were, singled out as Roosie boys, and you're not playing too well, and you get heckled and stuff. So it was a con at the time, but also a pro in terms of you grow a pretty thick skin from an early age. So there was always some benefit to take out of it in terms of my personal development or my personal growth as a young kid. But all in all, I wouldn't trade Dad for the world. And on what you boys were saying before too, and not listening to your dad, I up until I was 19, 20, thought Dad was an idiot. I wouldn't listen to him. I had, probably the best football coach anyone could ever ask, and he'd be teaching me how to kick, and I'd be going, mate, you don't know what you're talking about. This is how you kick a footy, mate. So it's definitely not just a rarity. It's a common occurrence for boys to just go, no, not listening to you, Dad, not listening to you, Mum.
Because you would look like an old unfit bloke trying to kick a footy too, right? And you'll go, mate, just stop.
Well, to be fair, he had a good kick and he's super fit as well. It was just, It honestly was just a case of like, nah, I know better than you. I'm 15, 16 and I know everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing he was a fit man all through his career, and fit and got the best out of his body and definitely his mind. So I'm sure he's taught you some good things there. But obviously, growing up, life after footy, mate. What happened with your footy career, and where did it suddenly halt for you?
So I played for New South Wales under 18s and played Swans reserves for 2 years as well, and finished up playing in end of 2013, which I was 19 years old. And one of the best things around growing up in a football environment is there are no delusions about what it takes to make it. I was never shocked that I wasn't shocked that I didn't get drafted. I knew exactly where I stood at all times. I was in the Swans Academy as well, so I had some great coaches there in Chris Smith. And so I got to 18, I had patellar tendonitis in both my knees, had to do about a 9-month rehab in that, and came back in my under-19 season. And I never really viewed myself. I knew when I was 16, 17, I was like, I'm never going to be, nothing wrong with this, but I was never going to be the 40-year-old club footy player. That was never going to be me. So I kind of did my under-19s year and played all right, played Swans reserves and was enjoying it. And I just thought, the end of that season, I was like, this isn't something that I'm overly passionate about, that I'm going to kill myself in every off season to get fit for. Footy being so competitive and growing up playing, at such a high level at every step of the way, I didn't want to just half-ass it. So I was like, you know what, I'm not willing to kill myself every off season to keep playing footy when I didn't really like. My brother loves it, so my brother he's took his first season off last year to travel for a year, but he's back in Australia and playing again. He absolutely loved it. He played NEFL and VFL, and he definitely should have gotten drafted. He was just on the outskirts, and should he have gotten drafted, he would have killed it inside a football club. But he definitely had that passion and that drive to keep going. Whereas I got to 18, 19, and I was like, nah, this isn't what I want to do.
I think it's important you were able to call that out pretty quick though. Like it's good that you did, because you know, even at the local level, you see some kids, they want to try and play something in football, VFL or first tier EFL, for instance, and they're just banging their heads up against the wall, and they're wondering why the hell it's not working. Sometimes you just have to try and accept that it's just not for me, and there's various reasons for that. Unfortunately, I was a 40-year-old club footballer that you were mentioning just before, but I think, if you've got the maturity, I guess, or the willingness to say, hey, I'm not doing it, I think that's got to be a benefit. I think, and it'd be good to get your thoughts on it. I was always thinking about the whole Silvani thing that happened last year, and it wasn't so much the older Silvani I was concerned about, the two boys, but it was Ben. And Ben was brought into that club, massive expectations, blah, blah, blah. That all just blew up. And then he was delisted. I always wonder, and it'd be good to hear what your insights or thoughts might be on it. If you were Ben, how would you deal with that? Like, it's pretty rough. He would have been only 20 when he was actually advised, nah, it's not for you anymore.
Yeah, I think first of all, the biggest disconnect in anything but sport is highlighted, and with the work that I do with young boys, it's highlighted too, is that the disconnect between a goal and the actions people are taking towards their goals. To become an AFL footballer is no easy feat, and it's not that it's a big goal or it's an impossible goal. It just depends on what you're doing every single day. Are you kicking the footy every day? Are you fit? Like, are you going for runs 3, 4, 5 times a week? You know, Dad told us from an early age his schedule when he was playing part-time footy when he played. So he had a full-time job and then was running 5 days a week to keep fit, training 3 days a week, and then playing on Saturdays. So he had one day off where he'd take Sundays off to rest, and then he was back on it. And I see the good part about also having, so my mum's American, for those who don't know, is that I'm very heavily influenced by the American culture too, is that you see it a lot more in American culture, that athletes will do anything and everything to achieve their goals. They go above and beyond to do whatever it takes. Whereas in Australian culture, I think the biggest downfall for young aspiring athletes, is looking to very talented footballers who don't put a lot of effort in, and thinking that they can become highly talented footballers without putting a lot of effort in. And so I remember I was fortunate enough to sit in a couple meetings through a draft combine one year, and you know, they're asking these boys, one of them was coming back from injury. Do you think you've done everything? Yeah, I've done every single thing I could possibly do. I could not have done a single thing more to get myself back from injury. And then, you know, they ask a few other questions, and they go, okay, so do you drink much? And, oh yeah, I drink every now and again. Okay, did you drink much this year? Oh yeah, you know, just like on Saturdays and that, you know, just a few beers and rah. And it's like, okay, so do you think you did everything you could to get back from injury then? And then it kind of clicks. Like, you're actually not doing everything you can to get back from injury, and there's so much more that you can do. And the biggest, again, with the work that I do with young boys, it's like they set these goals, and I'm like, mate, you can do this goal, but I don't think you understand what it's going to take for you to achieve it. Or at least look back and go, I gave it my all, so hey, it's not for me, and that's fine, but at least I gave myself 100% effort. And I look back at I loved basketball growing up, and I look back and I had a really good year 11 year and a really average year 12 year, and I look back on that, and I don't look back on that with regret to how I played. I look back on regret to how much effort I put into that year. I go, because I didn't play very well, but I look at it and I go, geez, I could have trained like every day, and I wasn't. I could have put up more shots. I could have done all these extra things, and I would have had such a better year 12 year. So that's the disconnect. And to circle back to Silvani, I actually used, Jack Watts is probably a better example. If he didn't go number 1 draft pick, would he have had so much scrutiny? Like, if he had gone number 20, number 30, he's probably a pretty decent footballer that has a pretty good career and flies a little bit under the radar, doesn't get as much scrutiny, and has a good career. Whereas he elevated an 18-year-old. I think Jack went was captain at 19 or 20 of a horrible football club at the time. Like that's a lot of bloody pressure to put on a boy, and then to be publicly scrutinised every single day for your entire career, no matter where you go, even when he got traded. Like, you know, you have to be incredibly mentally resilient to overcome that and continue going, which I've met Jack a bunch of times, which he is. But it doesn't completely drown out the noise in the wider social conversation.
I think you raise a really good point for me. It's not just the kid that's involved there, and I suppose that's why it's important to have third party people like yourself. Straight away, I go to, well, hold on, who are the parents in the room in all this, by the way? Well, who are the adults? Some of the adults that made those decisions on Paul Jack to make him captain of Melbourne Footy Club at 20 when they were absolutely rock bottom. I mean, you don't do that. You don't do that to a kid. He is still just a kid. He hasn't even celebrated 21 birthday, right? So, and there's other decisions that are pretty poor across the. So for me, it's good to know that there can be people out there that these young guys can step to, not just the adults that are, straight at them in the room, because that's pressure. Doesn't matter what the environment is. Pressure's pressure. Yeah. Job interviews, the whole lot. But if there's a person that can be an outlet for them, I think that's really good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think sadly Melbourne has been one of those clubs that is really pushing and wants success desperately, and did everything they could to. Must have been a lot of pressure on that club to put Jack out there early. And to be fair to Jack, he actually went really well early in the piece. And then it wasn't until that kind of time that famous game where he absolutely got mauled by Collingwood in that famous game. And then sadly, Melbourne's traditionally done that to a few of the young blokes, and to the point where they've even made young blokes captain way too early. And I think, would have absolutely killed to have your dad there earlier in the piece, mate. And I'm sure he would have loved to have had Jack Watts as a young kid coming through the club. Because there weren't too many kids that had come direct from, high school straight in. A lot of kids were coming through that under-18s comp, and I think those kind of kids were ready. But, yeah, look, that was the only joy of being down low in the ladder, was getting high draft choices. But they didn't always pan out that way. And geez, so much pressure on a top 10 kid, really, and still is today, to be fair. But I think they come in a little bit more prepared now, even from a media point of view. The fitness is just A1. They absolutely know what level they need to be at. You see any of these kids at these draft camps now, and they kind of look like they've already played first year of AFL.
Yeah, I think the thing is to touch on that though, and Dylan, appreciate your feedback on this. You've got to be really careful about making these kids robots too. Like, you want to keep them on a straight and narrow. You want to make sure they avoid trouble and all the rest of it. But to do that, for me, you still got to make sure they still understand what the world looks like on the outside. And you talk about, it's been years, years about this whole AFL's a bubble. Sometimes that's true because of all these sort of things. You want to make sure they avoid everything at all costs, but especially when they're finished, and some of them are finished within 2 years, there's got to be a balance of exposing them a little bit to that sort of stuff. So it's hard to balance that. And yeah, I see him come back to local football and they battle a little bit with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a tough balance. And I think footy clubs are, I think the average career is 3 or 5 years. The last I looked into it, the average career of a player, because you remember 100 kids get drafted every year. So Tyler had a bunch of mates that got drafted and they're out by 2-3 years time. Clubs do a pretty good job now of going, okay, you have to be doing something. Like you're drafted, but you have to be at uni part-time, or you have to be learning a trade part-time. You have to be doing something part-time now. So they do a good job of, I guess, balancing out that aspect. I don't think there's any shortage of footy players experiencing the real world, which I think we can gather from some headlines and some gossip news and all that sort of garbage. So I think they're experiencing society just as much, as probably a little bit too much.
Yeah, they're not hanging out to be e-sport champions, mate, that's for sure. And I know I know esports and that sort of stuff is high on the agenda when you're in the bubble, but when you're out of the bubble, I'm sure. And to be fair to the guys like yourself, we're just all human beings at the end of the day, and there's no reason why these boys shouldn't get out and enjoy a bit of company. Sadly, we're in a phase of life where there's a lot of pressure on these kids to not only be mentors and heroes to young kids as well, but they get a lot of pressure on being out there in that local, out there at pubs and stuff like that, and that pressure coming from other people, whether it's wanting to have a chat, a photo, a beer, whatever, or a punch on, worst case. It's just so unfair, and you'd love to think that culture is going to change, but it's been like that forever. I don't know where else that can be different, apart from, sadly, a lot of the boys don't get to go out kind of during the season.
Yeah, and I talk about this with the boys that I mentor too, because we've shifted even from a larger social aspect to where men now are under the microscope just in general. Men just in general under the microscope in terms of how we act, how we behave ourselves, how we talk, all those sorts of things. And the balancing act is hard. Where are we being too hard on people? Are we not being hard enough? Well, it's difficult. But I just say the same thing to the boys, and it's the same with footy players. Is any chance to turn yourself into a better person is just one that you have to take that perspective on. So rather than looking at it as like I can't do anything and I can't muck up, it's like look at it as like okay, cool, I've got people looking to me to be role models, which means I have to be the best version of myself as often as I possibly can. So that I just try to frame it in a positive light. I mean, I got I don't know if you know this when you were looking up my name or whatever, but I got done for drink driving when I was 20 years old, and I was in the news, and I was like, my whole life, Dad told me like, the Roos name is important. You got to be careful, and I was like, yeah, like I got it. I thought I did. I was like, yeah, like I get it, like, and I took it seriously up until then it happens and you're like, what, someone is reporting this in news, radios, papers. I was like, this is ridiculous. And then that's when I really understood it. I was like, okay, I get it now. So, you've just got to be really careful, like making good decisions. It's nothing you can do about it, to be honest. There was nothing I could have done about it except for not drink drove. Like that was on me. I can sit around and complain and be like, oh, boo-hoo, like why are there people reporting this news on me? But in reality, it's my decision to get in the car and drive drunk. So I just have to live with the consequences and go, okay, well, for 100,000 different reasons, I can't be doing that again.
Yeah, and the other thing that's out there now is obviously social media that wasn't out there back in the day. And everyone's a reporter these days. If there's any chance that they can take a photo or get some sort of audio or video of someone doing something wrong, famous or not, they'll try and do it. So we touched on young guys and being out there in the market now. Now we're seeing obviously AFLW getting such big prominence and pushed heavily with the AFL, and young women are now going through exactly that same thing, mentors and role models for young girls. So it's great to have that balance now, especially pushing an AFL sport. It'd be interesting to see how NRL adapt, and I know they have the women's league as well, but we don't get to hear too much about that in respect to the AFL because that's such a juggernaut. Yeah, but just tell us a little bit about the concept you've come up with here with Prince to King. I love just even the title and such a critical age for young men. Just tell us a little bit about that program.
Yeah, so I think you mentioned it right at the start. I was doing some research and looking into, okay, I want to start working with young boys. Let me have a look as to what's already out there. Let me look at my competitors. And to be frank, apart from school programs, group programs, obviously football clubs and leadership programs like that, there was not a single thing I could personally find where there was one-on-one mentoring for young boys around this idea, just in general, but specifically around the idea of what does it mean to be a man, and how do we transition from that critical age of being a teenager into manhood. You know, the classic rites of passage that we've had for thousands of years in Eastern cultures, but in indigenous cultures as well, has slowly over time completely disappeared, where we have no real transition from boyhood to manhood. Like, you know, we've got, when you're 18 you can drink, when you're 16 or 17 you can start to drive, right? But we don't actually teach young men, and I went to an all boys school and loved my experience there, but there's such a gap in the market for teaching young boys on how to behave, on how to give them the tools to critically think for themselves, on how to show up in integrity, and how to go from being a prince to a king. And for me, you know, I take the Jungian perspective, Carl Jung, the psychologist, his perspective on what a king is, which is the base, you know, at a base level, is just to be of service to other people and to serve other people, to serve your kingdom, right? So I talk a lot about that within the confines of my program. And it really was born out of my own, I guess, personal story around suffering from depression and anxiety, and really getting into a place where I was struggling mentally when I was about 20 years old. I went through a bad breakup with my girlfriend at the time, and you know, if you'd asked me how I was going, I was fine. I just didn't have the awareness or the self-awareness to actually properly answer that question. And so 6 months of gradually drinking more and more and eating more and more McDonald's and not working out and not meditating, you know, all these practices and good habits that I built up over a lifetime, and they all fell away. And in came bad habits. You know, it was no wonder that I was depressed and anxious after 6 months of that. And then you also pack on the fact that I'd gone through a breakup and I hadn't properly dealt with that. I did what 90% of young men, and not even young men, just what men do. I went out and drank and tried to sleep with every girl I laid my eyes on. So it really was a chance when I am now, you know, now I'm 26, a bit older. I'd like to think I'm a little bit wiser than I was when I was 20. You know, that this opportunity to go, I can give back to these boys who's, you know, dad kept pushing me. He's like, who's going to actually, you know, who's the low hanging fruit? Who's going to listen to you, you know, young men? And so, I have another business called Momentum, that I run with two business partners where we mentor, you know, 30, 35-year-olds plus, and my two business partners are 35 and 36. So that's a bit easy for the three of us to sell that mentoring. But for me personally, being 26, it was like, yeah, let's help out where I can help out the most. And so, you know, I really resonate with what the boys are going through. You know, it was 8 years ago that I was in high school, and so I remember the social anxieties. I remember the educational anxieties. I remember playing sports on weekends and how stressed out you get before that, and how much importance you place on playing well. And you know, yeah, you put up that photo now around, you know, young men don't typically seek help. They don't really talk about their feelings. We've been, you know, taught from a young age. And I had great parents, but I had two kind of really clear standout moments for me when I was younger that, upon reflection, really shaped me, was when I was about 10 years old, and Dad and I always get into an argument over what actually happened. I say he pushed me over at the park because we were playing footy. I say he pushed me. He reckons I've tripped. So I will give both sides of the story. I usually don't give both sides. I usually just say he pushed me. So, and I fell onto a sewer pipe drain down at Bronte Park and broke my collarbone.
No.
I remember I was about 9, 10 years old, and I'm wailing, crying, and you know, Dad's telling me to get up, stop crying, you're embarrassing me, rah rah rah, all these sorts of things. And again, upon reflection, that was the last time I ever cried from a physical injury, and then I probably didn't cry for a really long time after that anyway. And so small things like that, where you know, there's a great TED talk, I can't remember what it's called either, where this African American man's talking about the different ways in which he treats his daughter compared to his son. His daughter comes crying, he's like, "Oh, come here, it's okay." His son comes crying. By the time the son's already there, he's pissed off, and he's like, "Why the hell are you crying? Act like a man." And it's, you know, it's true. I see that in so many instances across society where we do allow women to process their emotions, and that's a big reason as to why when they get to adulthood, they are better at processing their emotions versus men. We develop unhealthy coping mechanisms and unhealthy ways to deal with our emotions as they arise. We say it's, everything's going to be okay and we'll be right and we'll just push on and get through it. And, a lot of the time it's not okay. Worst case scenario, you look at the statistics, especially in Australia around mental illness, 7 out of 8 suicides every day are men. So there's fundamentally a problem amongst male culture in terms of how we treat each other, but also it's not, I say male culture, really it's society, because women get uncomfortable when men cry. A lot of women, not again, we're speaking generally here, a lot of men are good at handling their mates crying. Again, we're progressing, but generally speaking, people are uncomfortable around men crying. We kind of see, especially when we start to see a father figure or a male we really look up to who we deem to be strong, they start crying. It's like, oh my God, what the hell do I do with this emotion? And so, educating people around that, and to bring it full circle, I tend to rant in these questions. I think that's a trait that I picked up from Roosie. That's one of the big things that I teach the boys. It's like, guys, it's totally okay to cry. Like, fuck, I cry all the time. I went through a breakup last year and moved to Hawaii and spent 3 months going down to the beach and just crying. And now I'm like, my mental health is the best it's ever been because I properly dealt with what I needed to deal with. And now I'm, on top of the world. But you take me back to when I was 20 and 6 months after a breakup, I'm struggling. A year after a breakup, I'm struggling. 2 years, I'm still thinking about her and checking her Instagram. And it's like, it's a common thing. Guys just don't admit it or talk about it. But I see so many of my mates years after a breakup still going, that still hurts. That still doesn't sit well. And women are like, fine. They've dealt with their emotions in a healthy way. So that's a big part of my work and a big driver behind why I got involved in working with young boys.
And that's such a critical age, 16 to 22. Any reason specifically that bracket, or you just think that's one of the most influential periods that you can capture, and they've had a bit of life experience and turn them a little bit at that point?
Exactly right. I think 16 to 22 year olds, you can have any conversation that you want with them, and there's no, I never, like, I don't have to watch my language around them. There's like those sorts of small nuances where I can just be myself and talk to them and, ask them about girls and parties and all that sort of stuff. And they're at an age where it's not like I feel uncomfortable. I'm like, oh, should I tell their parents or something that they're drinking on the weekends? It's like, well, they're 17, 18, their parents probably know that they're drinking on the weekends, right? So it's just for me that critical age where so much is going on. You hit 14, your testosterone levels rise 400%. You starting to spend time around social circles where you may be pressured into doing things that you actually don't want to do. And so how do you handle that when you're 16 and you don't want to drink, but all your mates are going, you're a pussy for not drinking, right? Like, how do you actually, there's no, your parents tell you, like, you can come to me and speak, but how often do you actually go to your parents to talk about that sort of thing for fear of getting into trouble or for fear of any number of reasons? So you tend to just deal with it yourself, right? Or maybe you've got one mate who doesn't drink and you two will try to stick together. Or so the 16 to 22 year old bracket has such a important effect on what happens in the rest of your life, or at least until your 30s or so. Like that, those sort of decisions that you make and the people you decide to hang out with. You leave high school, you lose a lot of structure. Men need structure. We thrive within it. Even the boys and the guys who are like, I don't like structure, it's like you give them structure and they thrive within it. You leave high school, it's like, come to uni if you want to. No one's gonna tell you have to, but if you don't come, you're going to fail. So there's so much, outside of high school that men need support in. Men and women, but obviously I work with men, need support in. And then purpose and mission is huge, and I talk about that in both my businesses. Where, what is going to be your mission in life, or what's going to be your purpose in life? And there's a great book called the second mountain, and it talks a lot about, everyone climbs the corporate ladder or they do something, and that's called the first mountain, right? They set these extrinsic goals, and they get to the top of that first mountain, they get to the top of it, and they go, geez, this was completely unfulfilling. What do I do now? And then they go up the second mountain where it's more mission-based, purpose-based, giving back, similar to what you boys here have done with the podcast, right? You find something that's, fuck, this is awesome. We get to have conversations every week. We get to engage with really cool people, and then on the back of that, hopefully provide value and hopefully help people out, as you said, around so what's been happening. And so there's a mission involved in what you're doing here, and that's, I'm sure this doesn't feel like work to you. I'm sure this feels like you get to have fun and impact people, and if it goes really well, then you get to impact a bunch of people.
Yeah, exactly right.
It's really interesting for me, Dylan. I've got 2 boys, 21 and 22, so they're right in the hitting zone for you, and a lot of what you said pretty much is spot on. But I think it is the most important age bracket to hit, because I'm doing dumb shit. I'm 44, so it doesn't stop necessarily. So, but with all that dumb stuff and all the immaturity that still might be there, that means that there's things that can happen to you mentally all the way through to that age. And have that old cliche, you wish you knew a lot of things. You go back knowing what you know now, and then you go back. I mean, there's a bit in that, but at the same time, you can't regret what you've already done. So to that point, I think it's really crucial that if you can drive your own behaviours with help from others at that young age, I totally agree with that. Yep.
Yeah. And it's a tough one for this is where, boys do experience this more than girls, again, is we like taking risks. It's something that we enjoy doing. We enjoy pushing the envelope, and something that parents, especially for kids younger than me, probably 18 and younger, the parents are really struggling of those kids is the balance. And to be honest, I don't even think they're at the balance conversation again, this is generalized speaking. They're so afraid of their kids taking risks, and they're so afraid, and so they just come in and they take away all the risk, and they take away everything, and you get to 18, 19, 20, 25, 30, 40, you've built no resilience into your kids. And so they have no idea on how to take risks. They have no idea on what happens when I go into work and I get a poor performance review from my boss. It's like that can rock people, that can rock kids, right? And so that balance of like, well, you need to actually let your kids go out there and make mistakes. And Jordan Peterson talks, I don't know if you're familiar with Jordan Peterson, he talks about let the boys skateboard, right? Let them go out there, bruise themselves, break a bone, scab their knees, all these sorts of things, because that's how boys learn. That's how men learn, is we learn through, okay, shit, that hurt. Maybe I won't take that risk again, Like, again, back to my story, I was drink driving pretty frequently, and I have not drunk driven since I got caught and had all that thing happen. And so, that's a lesson that I try to teach my boys. It's like, hey, learn from me too. Like, you don't need to go down that path. That was just stupid, and that was idiotic and all those sorts of things. But that risk-taking behavior is so common amongst boys and men that if you don't kind of learn where that line is, it can be detrimental on both ends of the spectrum.
Yep. Just before we go on, mate, we're going to bring up another mate of ours who's normally on the show. It's normally a bit of a Three Stooges act, and we'll bring him up now. Glenn Curran, Cuz. How are you, Cuz? Good to see you.
Yeah, hey, lovey. Hey, Dylan, great to have you on, mate. You're a very wise man, mate. Wiser than your years.
I don't know about that, mate, but thank you. I appreciate it.
Great to have you on, mate. I listened to you as I was driving home from work. So that's why I was a bit late and hard. I know the time difference. Had to have it a bit earlier, but mate, really appreciate you coming on, mate.
Thank you. Thanks for
having us. No, it's great to have you.
Dylan, I wanted to touch on this this photo that I saw on your Instagram, and it's a really powerful one. I used it as their little intro, but no, it's safe. It's safe, but
good one. Okay, good.
Stop telling our young boys and men to man up. It's a really powerful statement. Just tell us a little bit about where that came from and where that was, and and where you're using this philosophy now.
Yeah. So I think that the term, traditionally speaking, has been used in a really what's the right word? Unconstructive. In a very poor way. It hasn't been very constructive to how our next generation of men operate, or our next generation of men are coming through, and even your generation too. You know, we tend to associate manning up with just getting on with it. We tend to associate manning up with just getting over it. And when we tell men and we tell boys to man up with those negative connotations associated with it, it just does a massive disservice to society everywhere. You know, broken men are not good for men or women. And when we tell 50% of the population that what they're going through doesn't warrant a human response, it can't end in any way but bad, short term or long term. And you can only man up for so long. Like, eventually the cracks are going to show in one way or the other. Eventually you're going to become an alcoholic. Eventually you're going to eat too much food to deal with the pain. Eventually you're going to become a workaholic and not spend time with your kids because you can't stand the man in the mirror and you don't want them to see you, right? There is some trade-off, and it's not just in traditional sense of alcoholism or drug abuse. It's in so many different ways. It's in being disconnected from your partner and divorce rates going up, right? It's broken homes, broken families, anger, domestic violence. There's so many different things associated when we bottle up our emotions and we don't deal with them healthily. And when we continue to propagate, or we continue to have this conversation that men need to man up and just get over it and just move on, and things should be right, and people have it worse over there, or such and such has it worse than you, it's just not solving any solutions, versus having a conversation around, hey mate, I saw you lost your job, COVID's been tough, can I help you out in any way, can I buy you a coffee, can I buy you a beer, can we have a chat, I just want to check in with you, mate, and see how things are going. And I hate saying especially the last 12 months, but especially the last 12 months, hopefully people have bonded together. Hopefully people have reached out. Hopefully people have done what you've done, which is, okay, haven't heard from so-and-so in a while. Maybe I should reach out to him. Pre-COVID, Dad would never go on a walk with his mates. And now I think him and Scotty Clayton and a few of these other Fitzroy boys and old teammates now go on a weekly walk on a Sunday morning, I think, around Brighton, right? Like, that would have never happened pre-COVID, but because in Melbourne, that was the only thing you could do, was go for a walk with, at one time it was with one other person, and you had to stand 50 feet apart and get on a walkie-talkie to talk to each other, right? So it's these sorts of positive changes that we can take out of the last 12 months, where it's, again, propagating positive masculinity. To me, and this is a controversial thing to say depending on what circle you're in, but there is no such thing as toxic masculinity. Masculinity is not toxic. The lack of masculinity, or the lack of healthy masculinity within people, is dangerous. You look at weak men, they're dangerous men because they become resentful, and then they start to act out and lash out to those that are even weaker than them. It's strong men. It's men with great values. It's men with healthy masculine traits, leaders that we have in our lives that keep those weak men in check, that say, no, that's not on, right? The greatest contributor to antisocial behavior, criminality in young boys is fatherlessness. So a lack of a father figure in a young boy's life is the number one factor to them going down the wrong path further in their lives. We as men, and we as boys, and we as a society, we need strong male role models in society, just as much as we need strong female role models, right? But we've demonized, one, we've got the man up side of society, and then we've also got the all men are no good, which is starting to gain a lot more traction, in the last 5 to 10 years. And so both are so unhealthy for society and so unhealthy for men. And again, I'm ranting because I'm so passionate about this, but the idea that this doesn't also affect women when we tell men to man up is so, like, that's not how society operates. It's not like women are off all in Sydney and men are all in Melbourne and then we come together to make kids or something, right? Like, we live in a society where we're together. And so if 50% of society is not doing too well and they've harmful messaging to boys and to men, it's going to affect women. And so society should want to have these conversations, at the very least have the conversations, and then hopefully make change. We're at a time where awareness is, we're no longer not aware, so we can't play the ignorance is bliss card around mental health or mental illness or masculinity or this sort of thing. We're aware of the problems. Now it's time for action, and it's time for change, and it's time for conversations like these.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that about the female aspect of it, and I do. It goes two ways with that. I agree with you. The toxic masculinity, it's an easy label to throw it out there from both genders, right? And it's not correct. I think, it's not so much that. I think I think they perceive that as bullying rather than it being a masculine thing, right? It's just a general. It actually is bullying. So the other sex bullying the other one, but vice versa too. I think it's a cop out to actually call it toxic masculinity because no one actually wants to address it, whether that's between two people or whether that's between a group, whether that's political levels. Who doesn't matter.
Well, one, it's lazy, as you said, and two, also it doesn't progress the conversation any further. Because if I say toxic masculinity, what does 8 out of 10 men do? All right,
shut up shop.
This person just doesn't like me. This person doesn't like, and whether that's right or wrong, that's the current landscape right now. So how can we have a conversation that's going to include men to go, okay, hey, there are things that men can be doing that are going to better themselves, better society, etc. Absolutely. Give me that conversation. Let's be a part of that conversation. How can I break down the stigma around manning up, right? That's something that men have been involved in. So I'm not saying that there aren't things that men are doing. We're not perfect, right? But let's have conversations that include men and go, hey, okay, how do we further this conversation so that it betters all of society?
Correct.
But as you said, like it's just a man does something, you can just be like toxic masculinity, and it's like, well, that's not solving any problems.
No,
that's not a solution based approach to anything.
No.
It's frustrating, especially working with especially working with men and working with young boys. It's frustrating because they grow up, they are growing up now thinking that there's something wrong with masculinity. Like that's what they just think masculinity is wrong or bad, and it's like, damn man, that's dangerous. That's a really dangerous rhetoric to grow up, and I feel really bad for anyone who preaches that.
Yeah. Off the topic, moving off the topic, I've got one question now. Fun fact for you, Dylan.
Yep.
I have had the pleasure of playing a season of local footy with your uncle, Simon. Back in 1999. He's a very, very different cat back then. I don't know if he's changed his stripes at all, but very different the way he went about things. But you weren't born by then. Well, you would have been just
94. I wouldn't be able to tell you if he's the same or different.
Yeah. And then I've coached against I presume it's your cousin Joel.
Joel.
Different intervals, and he was one of those guys that, geez, I wish he had have applied himself. He would have been an absolute star at VFL level, I reckon. But he was just a lad's lad, and that's fine. We all like those sort of things. But to your Prince to King program, I guess my key question would be, I look at Joel and I go, what an ideal thing if he was, I saw him playing at 20. But the Prince to King thing and trying to get him more aware of about himself, and then as a group of players, because Kaz and I are currently helping out up at the Lidar Football Club, senior coaching. How would you go about? Would the Prince to King program work for a group of blokes like that? If so, what's the easiest way to start applying that sort of program with you? Because you're in Hawaii, you can't come out and talk to them. So, is it online? How do you go about this sort of thing for us if we're, for instance, at Lidar?
For a football club, you mean? Like a program? Yeah.
Potentially something ongoing.
I think the greatest tool you can give anyone is self-awareness. And I know we're not having those conversations. I know that we're not having, if I was to tell you when you were 18 years old, mate, go and journal, what would you say? Like, you'd be like, what the fuck's journaling, mate? Or like, what the hell's that going to do for me? Or,
I'll just text.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, but we've got these tools now that, again, science is now proving, hey, if you do this, this is what's going to happen, right? If you meditate, these are the benefits, all these sorts of things. So from a footy club point of view, I think you just, you've got in one team that's playing 22 players, right? So you've got probably 40 to 60, depending how wide the scope is of your footy club. You've got 100 kids there, 200 people are part of a footy club, whatever it is, 200 personalities, 200 kids with different aspirations, 200 kids with different goals. Half of them, 70% of them aren't really aware what those goals are, or aren't too conscious about what the next step is in life. To take Joel for example, he would have no issue with me saying he wasn't having those sorts of conversations at 20. You just do what everyone else is doing around you. Everyone else is drinking. All right, I'm going to drink. Everyone's playing footy. All right, I'm going to keep playing footy. And to have the ability to step back and go, hang on, is this something that I want to do? And especially young men, we don't think, we just do, right? Like, here's a beer. Okay, let me chug a beer. Hey, go jump in the ocean. All right. Are they rock? We don't think, we just do. So self-awareness is the biggest tool you can give young men, especially young men at footy clubs and
Did you jump off that?
Did I jump off that? I swam in that, not that day, but I swam in that a few times while I was up there. So bit of cold therapy. And so I think time spent alone, time spent off of our devices, time spent journaling our thoughts down on paper, because once we get them out of our head and onto paper, it really starts to shift a lot of things. And it's why what's the statistic? You're 50 or 80% more likely to achieve your goal just by writing your goal down. So we know these things. We now know that there are real benefits to writing it out and journaling. And so, for a footy boy, you're 16, right. My 16 to 22, you're in that age where, okay, what do you want to do for the next even for the next 12 months, but for the next 5 years? Do you want to keep playing footy? Do you want to become a professional football player? What does that look like? You've got, hey mate, and this is the benefit of having, again, coaches and mentors to facilitate this for the young boys, is to go, okay, mate, hey, you have a shitload of talent. Like, you could make it. Here's what do you want to, or are you happy being a local footy player? Because you can, like, hey mate, if you want to be a local footy player, be a local footy player. But don't kid yourself that you're going to become a superstar if you're going to continue down the same route, right? I think the balance between support, in my other business, we talk about championing and challenging. Hey mate, I'm here for you. The champion side, challenge piece is, hey, that behavior is not acceptable. You can do better. That's not like, there needs to be both. It can't just be just the challenge, and it can't be just the champion. It's got to be, I'm here for you, and also you're acting like a dickhead, or like, mate, you want to be a professional footballer, but you drink piss from Friday to Sunday every weekend. It's not happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
Definitely that life balance is an interesting one, Dylan, that you look like you've, it's interesting from the outside looking in, you look like you've been able to achieve, most importantly recently. Is that part of the move to Hawaii, different space, a different outlook?
Yeah. I mean, the life balance is you're on a seesaw, really, aren't you? One day you've got really good life balance, and the next you're going, where the hell did that balance piece go? So, I'm 26. I have very few responsibilities. Life balance for me is very easy to achieve. I don't have kids. I don't have a partner. I don't pay rent. So from the outside in, you're right. It looks like I'm doing pretty well, and I'm very fortunate that I can come to Hawaii. I'm an American citizen. Again, like it's an important thing that you do bring up from the outside in. So many young boys are looking at eat meat and going, shit, he's living the life. And I try my best to not portray this living the life thing. And it's so funny. I actually had a really great conversation with my two business partners today. We did this exercise around our own code. So we have our own code within Momentum, and we're like, why don't we actually rate ourselves on how we're going? And so, we gave ourselves scores out of 10, we gave notes, and then we gave solutions to these 12 points. And one of the things that came up consistently for me from the other boys was my brand is actually inconsistent. And, there are photos on my Instagram that are really good and it's cool. Okay, he's working, he's doing this and that. And then there's also photos of me standing in budgies in front of a Ferrari. And it's like, well, what's that? Like, what's a yum, if I'm, that, yeah, there you go. There's one right there. Like, what's that photo doing? Right? So for me,
that's what you teach young guys, mate, to get out there and enjoy themselves. Right?
It's tough because I look at that and I go, well, I'm having fun, I'm living my life, and if you don't like it, go away, kind of thing. This is my page, and at the same breath, I'm also aware that I am teaching impressionable people or impressionable kids what it means, how to show up day to day. So it's great that I can do what I can do, but it's like the Spider-Man quote, like, to use a cliche, with great power comes great responsibility. If I'm mentoring these boys, what am I teaching them by posting that? So it was a great conversation for me to have with my business partners today around that, because we all need that. Like, we all need external sources to pull us up on our stuff, even small things like that, which, probably isn't that small, but it's again why good footy clubs are so beneficial to young boys, and why bad footy clubs are the most dangerous place possible for young boys, right? You come into a football culture where, and this has happened to me and to people that I know, you come into a football culture where the coach is on a Saturday night doing cocaine with the captain. What hope does an 18-year-old coming into that have? Like, and I'm big on personal responsibility, and if I'm that 18-year-old, I'm going, like, if I choose to do something, that's on me, it's not on the coach or the captain. So I'm big on personal responsibility, but at the same thing, environmental factors come into play, especially at an 18-year-old, 16, 17, 18-year-old level. So good football cultures, best place to be. Send your kids there. And that's why, again, the responsibility piece that coaches, captains, leadership groups have on their entire football community, really, versus those poor cultures is huge. I can't even remember what the question was. I ranted for that long. Yeah.
That's okay.
I hope I answered it.
I think I got a response.
We always,
Do you think you got one?
Yeah, we always talk about a show that's 30 to 45 minutes, and you've been very generous with your time, mate. An hour, and I know we could easily talk for another hour. You got
absolutely
so much to offer in this space, and we'd love to have this chat again, mate. Because I think it's really important. You mentioned, we talk about in the last 12 months. I think the next 12 months are the most critical ones that we can come across now. Both mental health and also resets, where we can get together again and say, okay, where are we up to? And I really like your comment about you kind of to have three guys that you're working with now that can actually call each other out and say, guys, let's rein that in, let's pull that in. And it's not necessarily about perception of how you portrayed out there. It's more a case of just keeping yourselves honest so you can all achieve a common goal. And I think you're doing some great things, mate, in amongst the both projects you're working on. And I'm sure that's not the only thing you're doing, mate. You got plenty on the go all the time, and really look forward to having you on again. But both DylanRoosCoaching.com is one to have a look for, and also the Momentum Lifestyle.com.au. And if you want to catch up with Dylan, write this down. It's a link tree, and you'll find out all the details about his courses and all sorts of things. So hopefully I've covered a few things there for you, mate.
You have, mate.
Just one question I've got without notice. Show 27, an influential number for you, number 27. Anyone you've come across that's you've loved as a number 27? We always ask this question.
You put me on the spot here.
That's all part of it, mate.
27. I'm trying to think. Who was 27 at the Swans growing up? I'm trying to think. Can you boys? I don't think they're. Oh, no, I can't think of anyone off the top of my head. My favourite number was number 2, which was Nick Davis. He was my favourite player growing up.
What about a 2 and a 7? Let's go with that.
Skew that. And number 7 was Ty Kennelly, I think, correct, at the Swans. And he was actually my mentor when I was at the state team for New South Wales. So there we go. I've managed to pull a rabbit out of a hat. Nick Davis is my favourite player, number 2. Ty Kennelly was a big influence in my under-18s year. So he was
2 different players.
Two different players, yep.
So while we're going with the hard questions, mate, so you've that's our answer without notice. Same thing, episode 27, I asked the same way each episode. You're having a dinner, Dylan. You can invite, obviously you're going, you can invite 5 people. Who are the 5 people? They can be living or dead, but any 5 you like.
All right, Michael Jordan, Drake, who I'm not sure if you boys know who Drake is, but he's a
we've got you.
Just making sure, checking the generational gap isn't too far. Probably Tiger Woods, to be honest. Let's bring it back to Australia. Let's get some Australians in there. Chris Hemsworth, and I'm going to go with. I need like a philosopher or something in there to make me look smart, don't I? Like a Carl Jung. Carl Jung, there we go. Make me look a little bit smarter than I actually am. So they'd be my 5, I reckon.
So a real men's club.
No,
awesome.
Well, yeah. 6 can be Margaret Thatcher. There we go. 6.
Oh wow. Wow.
It's going to be an interesting mix, that one, for sure.
Yeah.
Interesting enough, mate. You didn't invite your old man.
I've too many dinners with him. I don't need to have dinner with him again.
Absolutely, but I'm sure he'd like to be at the table, mate, catching up with some of your mates. So that'd be a good one. But just to finish on, mate, what else is happening with you? Just quickly, what's your kind of plans? Anything you're working on next, or do we just catch up with you on those links for now?
Those links for now, mate. The Prince King program just kicked off a couple nights ago. And my next intake will be mid to late May. So you can start, you can get in, you can jump on, I'm readily available. You can jump on calls with me. If you've got any questions, parents out there, kids out there, can jump on a call with me, 15 minutes, chat to me. I'll answer any and all questions. That link's in that link tree. It's also on my website, I think, as well. So, just the Prince King program is what I'm really focusing on there. And then momentum too for any guys out there, 20, 25 and up. Our mentorship through Momentum starts next week. So that's going to be a 12-week mentorship. We've got a great group of guys already in that. We're hoping to get, 20 to 30 guys in there. We've got 15 at the moment. And that'll be, a real good group of guys going through that program for 12 weeks.
Fantastic to hear, mate. Once again, mate, really appreciate your time. Episode 27, as I mentioned, it wasn't supposed to go past number 1, but you've been a good member of the number 27 club, mate. I know that there's been a lot of superstars in the 27 club. You're in it for all the right reasons, mate. Sorry?
Awesome, mate.
Anthony Ingerson, Aaron, for you, mate.
27, yeah. Probably one better for me growing up as a kid was the great Irishman Sean White, mate. So I'll take him. He was pretty handy.
Could play the
But once
boy.
again, Dylan, thanks again for your time, boys.
Thank you, boys.
Any last comments, or we're happy to wrap it there?
No, really good to have you on board, Dylan. Really appreciate it. We'll have to catch up with you in the next sort of 6 to 12 months. And as Aaron said, I think that'll be the interesting part going forward now, how we all cope with how we come out of what we've been through, I suppose, for want of a better word.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just make sure you're safe over there, mate. It's
appreciate that. You guys too.
Yep, absolutely, and look forward to catching up with you again very soon.
Yeah, great to have you on, mate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, Dylan. Have a great day,
Thanks,
mate.
Take it easy.
Cheers.